So how many books did you publish?
So at that time, 2 about prison and then profiles from prison. But those are both for universities. Those are both for academic books. They're published by academic publishers and they're used in criminal justice programs. And now I'm getting deeper into my sentence. So a couple of things happen because I got stopped for my PhD program. I think it was in my 8th or 9th year. And then I had to pivot. And something's happening in the world at that time, because this is the late 1990s. And what's happening in the world? The internet's starting. When I went to prison, there's no internet. There's no tech, that kind of stuff. But I'm reading about it and it's growing and I'm trying to get involved because we don't have access to any of that in prison. So I'm reading a lot about the web and I'm reading about the tech companies and I'm learning about growth. And I had this period where I'm really learning about the stock market because there's tech companies and they're on the stock. So I'm learning everything I can except how to actually do it. I used to dream about getting online because I didn't know what it meant. Like, what does it mean to get on the internet? How do you get on the internet? I couldn't conceptualize that. Well, you go on the computer, but how do you get online? I don't know. And what is this thing I'm reading about called a URL? I don't understand a mouse.
And a dot
right? All these kinds of things. I don't understand it, but I want to be a part of it. And through writing, I start developing an income stream in prison. And I'm very protective of my record. I don't want to get a disciplinary infraction at that time because now I've got all these professors that are believing in me and they're part of my life. And I was worried that if I got a disciplinary infraction, they would abandon me. You want to protect everything. So I remember going to the captain and when I had this opportunity to start publishing, I asked if they would allow me to publish. And, the bottom line is that they would say, you can't make money while you're in prison. And so I said, well, what if I assign the rights to my family? Could they have, because I have no rights. If I assign the rights, I don't make money. They do. And I remember one guy said to me, he said, well, I've got enough problems in this prison. If that's all you're doing, I'm not going to look at that. So that's how I started to make money in prison. And I started to invest that money. And it really changed my life because I started investing in these tech companies like America Online. Wow. And I made a lot of money in prison from those investments. So this is all changing for me. And that's what leads me to eventually meeting the woman I'm married to now.
So you have somebody on the outside, somebody in your family, your sister who was doing this investment.
Right.
Is she wondering why are you such a good investor? How are you making money?
I was lucky. Luck, big skill every time.
Good job.
I remember I got this first check from publishing. It was, insignificant. But I'd learned about investing because I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, Investors Business Daily, and books. And this is my whole life in prison, reading and studying. But I didn't have any money until I got this money. And I remember I called her and I said, hey, because she said, well, what do you want to do? It was I think it was like $2,000. I said, what do you want to do with $2,000? And I said, I want you to open a brokerage account online. And she said, well, how do I do that? And I'm saying, there's a company that's called E-Trade.
Wow.
And so she says, okay. And she goes, I don't want to put my credit card online. Wow. That's the way it was back then, right? I don't trust all that stuff. I says, come on, it's happening. And so my sister's just totally supportive of me. And she's asking, well, what if it loses? I said, so I'll lose the money. It's $2,000, but I don't need the $2,000. I want to invest in my future. And I don't only want to invest $2,000. I want you to borrow $1,000 against the $2,000 and use it on margin. And she's asking me, what does all this mean? How does this work? And I'm explaining it. And I always remember we buy it and we're doing it on the phone. And she says, oh my God, you already made $100. In seconds. Cause it was it was actually the first company I bought was Yahoo. And she said, what's a Yahoo? And I said, it's something, the search engine. I don't really know, but find it. It's got an exclamation point at the end.
It has a cool name, yeah.
And I'd read about the company, and it was one of the dominant internet companies that I'm reading about at that time. And so it goes, and there's crazy volatility, and I kept going up, and I did really well. I was very fortunate.
Wow.
So just focusing on 2 companies, America Online and Yahoo, and kept leveraging it up. Every time I earned more equity, I could borrow more and buy a bigger position. And so I'm becoming financially strong in prison.
And hopefully you sold those soon after because they went down fast.
So I leveraged and I made $1 million in prison.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, starting with 2000. So starting with 2000, it goes up to like $1 million.
In what time span?
So what happens is 97 or 98, it starts with 3,000. I borrowed 1,000. I have 2,000 equity. I borrowed 1,000. It's $3,000. Within 3 months or 2 months, it had turned into like $7,000.
Wow.
And I'm working with a guy in there that's pretty wealthy, and he's struggling with his he had a sentence of like 2 years, and he's saying, how do you stay so positive in here? So I said, I have a plan. I got a plan. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And I was so excited. And I told him I was investing in the stock market, and I showed him 2 times. He said, wow. He said, I never understood the stock market. He said, if you had more money, would you have made more money? I said, yeah. I said, so what would you have made if you had 200,000? I said, well, I would have made 600,000. And he said, let's do it. And he said, so he said, how about if I send $100,000 to you and we invest it, and that'll help me get through my last period of time? And I said, well, Gary, the thing is I bought the very volatile stock. If I had 100,000, that's life-changing for me. That would be life-changing. I said, I probably wouldn't be as risky with that as I would with 2,000. And, I knew that he was rich. And he said to me, I'll make you a deal. He said, if you do this with me, you just can't turn into being scared and buying really safe stocks. He said, I don't want to make $5,000. Okay. I'm a gambler and I want to try. And he said, and here's the deal. You do this with me. You teach me how to do it. We'll do it together. And if you, whatever we win, I'm going to give you half of it. And he said, but if you lose everything, I'm going to give you $50,000 after we leave here, before I leave.
What? So
That's a
win-win situation.
For me, it was a win-win. There was no downside. He just was so depressed.
Yeah,
prison can rip your life, particularly for somebody who's been really successful in the world. You're in there, they're telling you where to go, where to sleep, how to do things, right? And he just wanted a friend.
Yeah, a thrill too.
And a thrill, and to feel like he was alive again. Right. And so that was, so after I'd done that 7, he wires like $100,000 to my sister, and I invest it, and that 100 turns into more than 2 million.
Holy moly.
So in like less than 6 months. 7 months.
Holy shit.
So I'm in prison, but that doesn't mean it. I'm still in prison, and I've got a long ways to go. So he sent 100, and then I kept leveraging, and it turns into, I have $1 million in debt and $1 million in equity because I kept leveraging up, and then we lost. Then it starts to lose, and I would lose like $400,000 in a day or so. And I told him, look, Gary, I know it's significant for you, it's real money, but I said, this is like life-changing money for me. And I said, I'd like to sell, and I have to pay the tax, but I can give you back all your money and we'll split it. And he says, great, because he was getting close to going home. So we sold, my sister sold, she paid the tax that we owed, she gave him the 100 he gave back, and we split the difference. So at the end of the day, I think I was left with like $300,000, which was significant, starting with nothing.
It's incredible.
In prison. Amazing. I'm in prison. So that's life-changing for me. But as I recall, I pulled 100,000 out in cash to set aside, and I left the other 200,000 ride with stocks, and those went to zero. So those went to zero, but I still had $100,000 in cash, and that's what pushed me to start writing books more. And so I started writing books more, and that's my journey.